Hello and welcome to Crowdfunding Champions, where we learn from some of the most successful campaigns. I'm Rob Wilson, and I'm pleased to introduce our first ever recorded interview with Neil Campbell, VP of Growth at Moneybox, who recently raised over £7 million on Crowdcube. Neil, thank you so much for taking the time today. Would you be able to just start by just telling us a little bit about Moneybox and your role in the company?
Yes, so Moneybox is a sort of saving and investing app, and we're there to basically help everyone kind of save, invest for their future in a world in which the kind of wealth management industry is set up to really kind of serve people once they're already wealthy. Moneybox takes an earlier view, which is that we're going to give you the tools to help you kind of build up your wealth, and that is basically a whole range of kind of products. So it's everything from savings accounts offering kind of good rates of interest. It's all the tools to kind of get you into the habit of saving and sort of putting money aside, such as roundups from your kind of bank account purchases, weeklies and kind of monthly deposits, tools to help you kind of set goals. And then as well as the savings products, we also have a full range of investment products. So the standard sort of stocks and shares, ISAs, general investment accounts, lifetime ISAs, both in a cash version and a stocks and shares version, which are obviously kind of great product for buying your first home because there's a 25% kind of government bonus that goes into those. And then we also offer pensions as well. So really kind of thinking about the long term. All those kind of investments are sort of invested into sort of cheap, low cost tracker funds, very much with a sort of emphasis of kind of set and forget and sort of really be surprised once you start to make momentum in that. We also offer a kind of socially responsible or kind of ESG fund, which is great as well for people who want to kind of make a statement with their money and make sure their kind of sort of money matters in terms of investing into their kind of own personal principles. My role at the company, so I'm the VP of Growth, so I essentially kind of look after new customers kind of coming on to the kind of Moneybox platform, and then when they're on the platform, how do they engage with the platform? So how do they use the service more deeply? How do they get the most out of the service, use all our kind of tools, be that putting more money into their accounts, opening new accounts, using the tools to set goals, etc.
Now, you recently closed your first ever crowdfunding campaign, raising over £7 million from nearly 1,700 investors, which I know is one of Crowdcube's most successful campaigns to date. How did it feel to get that level of support from your community and also the wider Crowdcube investor base?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So yeah, we were very, very pleased with the kind of crowdfunding round. It's one of those things that we always wanted to have the opportunity to include our customers in, in the kind of success of Moneybox. We have more than 500,000 customers now. We know that they're kind of big advocates of Moneybox, and for a lot of people, that Moneybox has really helped them kind of along their kind of journey of their kind of financial goals. And so we just really wanted an opportunity to let them kind of participate in that. And that was actually one of our kind of main reasons for kind of doing the crowdfund round was we'd already raised £30 million of institutional money. And so the crowdfunding was really an add-on to that. It wasn't a sort of, we desperately kind of need the money. It was more a case of we'd really like people to participate and help to kind of turn them into advocates. Now, when you do these things, it's always a bit of a kind of shot into the kind of dark. You just don't quite know what the level of response is going to be, how quickly it's going to go. And so we were very, very pleased that, when we did actually kind of push it live, we just had a massive response from kind of customers, and it went, very, very well. We raised £7 million. I think it was in about, I guess, a day and a half, essentially, that the campaign was kind of live for. The vast majority of that money kind of came from existing kind of customers. So just really kind of pleased that we went externally to the Crowdcube investors as well, but just really pleased that the vast majority was filled initially because it was only open for the first day to our existing customers. And so it was great just to kind of see that. And what was particularly pleasing was, as you said there, the total number of investors was very high. So 16,000 is a really kind of great number, especially as some of the kind of previous stuff in the UK was like 7,000 or 8,000. So the fact that we got a lot of sort of slightly smaller kind of investment amounts, but a lot more kind of investors involved was absolutely great.
You mentioned there that this campaign formed part of a wider investor round. Now, we've seen companies such as Free Trade launch campaigns much earlier on in their journey. Was there a reason why Moneybox decided to wait until its Series C to launch its first crowdfunding campaign?
Um, uh, Not especially. To be honest, we just kind of felt it was the right time. We thought about it at the sort of Series B, and it didn't quite hit the sort of the priority list. You know, when you're kind of executing as a kind of company, and you know you just want to get on and kind of build the product and build the business. Um, it kind of felt a bit additional, and it just felt for us the timing was right at the Series C stage. So that was it's kind of why we did it. There's no special reason why we didn't do it earlier, but it just felt the right time for us.
Okay, fair enough. And you mentioned you had a pretty high uptake amongst your user base. Now, did you see your campaign as an opportunity to acquire new users at all?
We, in some senses, yes and no. So we didn't do anything kind of complicated where we sort of went massively kind of public and sort of said join Moneybox in order to get the ability to kind of invest into our kind of crowdfund round. We really kind of kept it to the existing sort of customers. And like one of the bits of advice that I would always have for kind of doing kind of crowdfunding rounds is kind of keep it simple. You know, if you got to be very kind of clear on your objectives and just really kind of focus on those, because once you sort of get on to adding things on and thinking of complicated schemes to incentivize people to download the app and see it as kind of customer acquisition, it just all gets a bit kind of complicated and messy. And what we really kind of thought was like it's very clear here. It's about rewarding existing kind of customers and kind of making a bit of a splash for the company and getting it done as quick and sort of simply as kind of possible. And so the more complicated stuff around, oh, could we have an incentive scheme, or should we only allow people who have more than X pounds in their Moneybox account to invest? We just sort of thought that just muddies the water. Let's keep it very, very simple. And so yeah, that's the kind of approach that we took. Obviously, you see it positive from the kind of PR that you get and from the general kind of buzz around the company, and it's something that sort of adds to your reputation on an ongoing basis. But we didn't see it as a massive kind of customer acquisition event or anything like that.
What made you decide to launch your campaign on Crowdcube over Seedrs?
Yeah, well, that doesn't make much difference now that they're both merging.
Yep.
Yeah, so for us, for our level of kind of company and the sort of size of raise and the sort of sophistication, we're way beyond the sort of we have a great idea, kind of buy into the vision stage. This was big amounts of money, and so the two choices are really Crowdcube and Seedrs, and so those are the main two that we kind of assessed. I have to be very honest. I think both of them would have done a kind of great job. I think it would have been a successful raise, whoever we had kind of done it with. The thing that sort of edged it towards kind of Crowdcube was mostly just the kind of fit with the kind of team there. So what we sort of liked was we set out their objectives, and then they were kind of very clear about what we'd have to do to kind of meet those objectives, including sort of just telling us stuff that was that's just superfluous. If you want to work it this way, just don't do that. So the classic example being taking payments in app. So we take money from our customers every week. There's definitely a mechanism by which we could have changed the app in order to take the crowdfund payment in the kind of week of the kind of crowdfund, and then kind of process itself, maybe save some fees for the kind of payment processing. Could have made it sort of probably a tighter experience with a bit more kind of conversion. But kind of Crowdcube turned around and sort of said, look, if you really want to do this quickly, you want to make splash and get out and kind of get on with kind of building the business, this stuff is just superfluous. So I guess I would sum it up as a feeling that they told us what we needed to hear, not what we wanted to hear. And so they kind of guided us away from some of that stuff. And that's really why we kind of chose them. We just kind of thought they had a bit more kind of straightforward approach.
Picking up on the time frame, you mentioned that you were looking to launch this campaign as quickly as possible. Talk me through the process that you went through to launching your crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, so we were very kind of conscious of like this could be a distraction, so we could sort of be noodling away on this for 3 months, and kind of sort of consume our lives. And so the timeline for us was probably about 6 months out. We sort of decided that we were going to do it, and we sort of got the kind of board permission and everything kind of ready, which is pretty straightforward. Then about probably 6 to 3 months out, we just did the sort of vendor selection process. So we kind of chose Crowdcube, and again, that was pretty low effort, just a kind of bunch of meetings and a bunch of just assessing and sort of catching up. And then once we kind of made the decision about 3 months out on it, we actually put the whole thing on hold and sort of said, right, we're going to go in sort of late July when we kind of finally went. But we're going to put the whole thing on hold until about 4 weeks before, or kind of 5 weeks before. And then we had a fairly intense kind of period where I was probably working on it sort of 70% of my time, and one a girl, Annie, from our kind of marketing team, who was sort of doing a lot of the kind of content and sort of building the video production, things like that. She probably worked on it sort of 100% of her time. And so we had a pretty intense sort of 3-week period where we just got everything, all the materials together, got everything kind of lined up, got all the kind of messages sort of tied up, got the video shot and scripted and then shot and then edited. And so, yeah, we kind of like focused it all in, because we just didn't want to have this sort of, 6th month, we're continually building the deck, we're continually changing it. We wanted to get everyone sort of focused on it. And so we pretty much did that kind of 3-week process. And then that was meant to be the kind of start of the sort of 2 weeks. We'll tell customers, then there's a kind of build up to the actual going live. We'll then put it live, and then we'll run it for anywhere between, 2 days and a week. We weren't kind of quite sure how long it would go for. What actually happened is that we did that kind of 3 weeks. And then just because a bunch of other things we were talking to customers about and a bit of timing, we kind of delayed the whole thing 2 weeks. So we kind of did nothing on it for 2 weeks. And then we kind of kicked off that sort of intense process 2 weeks later. And then the sort of intense process basically starts with, the first time it goes live into the kind of press, a whole kind of string of kind of communications that you're kind of sending to customers to get them to pre-register. Once they kind of pre-register, they went on to sort of different, sort of slightly more high frequency set of communications. And that all kind of built up to the day when we sort of went live. And then when we went live, it was literally kind of all hands on deck, just tracking it, answering kind of queries as they came through, and generally managing the whole thing, trying to take a decision about when we were going to close it, etc. And so I guess the advice I would give to people would be, put a lot of effort into the video. It's the one thing that sort of everyone kind of watches in some form. And so the video is just doesn't have to be really high production. We kind of, you could get away with kind of doing it on an iPhone if you really had to. Ours, we shot it with a very small kind of crew, because in the middle of kind of lockdown, so it was all socially distanced. But it was pretty simple. It was, the two founders and one investor giving a piece to camera, and then we kind of wrapped it up with a bit of kind of music and a bit of kind of on-screen graphics. But it's worth kind of putting that in. So having a budget for that, for a proper camera crew, which is probably £3,000 or £4,000, and so that's really worth kind of putting the effort into. The other thing is, decide in advance what your kind of sales pitch is. And really just sort of execute on that. So our sales pitch pretty much was, we've already raised a bunch of institutional money. So there's lots of investors this is their professional job, who have kind of invested. You get to invest on the same terms. We're making great progress. And that was pretty much it. Yeah. And so that was, what we kind of got across in the kind of documents and all the kind of presentations, was just kind of hitting those points through it. The other kind of thing, advice I would give, is that the investor presentation is pretty much the most detailed document. So it's the thing that pretty much contains everything. So it contains all the team bios, it contains, all the kind of any data that you're going to share. It contains the sort of narrative of the kind of product and why you set it up. And so it's kind of the first thing to do, and then everything else sort of, follows from that, essentially. And so that's what we kind of thought. We kind of got the vibe right in the investor presentation, and then we used that to kind of shape a lot of the other stuff as well. And then other bits of advice, I would say, think of everything, so it's not just those materials. So one of the big things for us is that on the actual day it goes live, you just get a whole bunch of kind of questions. We're a regulated industry, and so we have to be very careful about what we say to kind of customers, especially with we have customers who are savers, and here is an investment, which is investment in a kind of startup company. It's a liquid investment, and so it would be irresponsible for us to sort of push that kind of hell for leather. And so all our kind of communications have to kind of go through compliance, and if all the kind of communications go through compliance but you want to respond on the day, then you need to have some of those kind of things prepared in advance. So there's a little bit of like, just think of everything that anyone could ask. We spent a lot of time going through other kind of pitches and their forums and just seeing the kind of questions that people asked to make sure that we had a stock answer for pretty much everything. And then on the day, it sort of became a case of, right, here is a question, right, we've got these two answers, they both kind of cover it, I've sort of mashed it together into one. Compliance have had a quick check, they're happy, and we post it. And I think that's important to kind of keep the momentum going. So as people ask these sort of questions, they, if they're getting quick responses, then people sort of see that the company's really engaged, and it kind of sets the tone, and that's how you kind of build momentum through the day.
100%. And I do actually remember seeing the number of users that were coming in on the discussion forum and answering some questions on your behalf. And from an investor perspective, I think that's so encouraging to see such brand advocacy.
Yeah, so our policy on the forum was we would kind of answer the first question, but we wouldn't kind of get involved in the sort of back and forward kind of chat around it. So we would kind of give a good, well thought out, kind of clear answer with as much information as we could to the first question, and we wouldn't kind of go back and forward. And then, so it's really great when you sort of see the engaged users kind of get in and then basically have that kind of back and forth with it as well. Especially because lots of people ask a question that we don't really have an answer for, so lots of people would sort of say, how much is my investment going to be worth in 5 years? And as that's an impossible kind of question for answer. The answer is it's going to be worth absolutely as much as we can make it be worth, because we're all very strongly incentivized to kind of grow the company, and we are shareholders too. And so, but a lot of people are looking for, it's going to be a 5x. Like, who knows? So it's kind of good that other users can get involved and sort of say, well, clearly the company's not going to answer that because they just don't know. So same with how are you going to exit? Are you going to IPO in 3 years? Is that, I don't know. It's kind of we were too busy kind of building Moneybox as a business.
Yeah. And just reflecting on the campaign, do you think there's anything that you would do differently if you were to launch again?
Yeah, like in hindsight, it kind of went better than we were expecting. But I guess that's that sort of unsurety kind of point of, you just don't know until you kind of put it out there how well it's going to go. And so I think, yeah, that was one thing. I think that maybe we would have been a bit more confident. Had we been more confident that it was going to go quicker, then we could have communicated to customers that it was probably going to go pretty quickly. And therefore, they should have, if they want to get involved, they should think about it on the day. There's we had a couple of gripes from people who sort of said, oh, I was going to think about it tonight, I was going to go through all the materials, and you guys we essentially sold out, because with these kind of crowd funds, there is a limit, which is essentially 8 million euros, above which you can't raise any more than that without kind of having a full prospectus and all investment bankers in a very expensive kind of process. And so it effectively kind of puts a limit at about £7 million on the whole thing. And so we effectively kind of sold out, but there were some kind of investors who were like, oh, I was going to consider it tonight and I really want to get through it, and now I've kind of missed out. And so that was, I think, if we'd sort of in hindsight had known that it was going to go that kind of quickly, we probably would have prepared people for that a little bit more. Whereas going into it, we didn't know if it was going to be 3 days, a week. I don't think we would have gone much longer than a week, because, as I say, it was less about the money and more about kind of allowing customers time to invest for us.
Yeah. And now you've launched your first crowdfunding campaign. Do you see yourself launching a follow-up?
It's kind of yes and no, or kind of yes, no, and maybe. So yes, it was a very positive experience. Very happy to kind of have customers as kind of shareholders, and in fact, at the minute we have an incentive scheme for pension people. So if you transfer a kind of pension to Moneybox, we will give you some free shares in Moneybox as a kind of incentive to get you over that sort of hurdle of, you know, sorting out your pensions and consolidating your old workplace pensions is one of those jobs that everyone knows they need to do and kind of get on top of it, but no one's actually kind of, it's hard to have the incentive to do it. So it's kind of getting them over that hurdle. So we're very kind of keen on share ownership, and therefore, very positive from that perspective. However, we have a lot of money in the bank now. And so, we're sort of, as a company, heads down, executing on the future. We've got lots of kind of exciting kind of product extensions that we're kind of working on that we will sort of be launched in due course. And therefore, it's a kind of case of, well, I can't conceive of in the next 2 years of us kind of, needing the money and kind of wanting to do it for that reason. But then the maybe, because you just never know. It could be that we suddenly find a great investment opportunity that we, want more capital for, and and if we were to kind of go out and do that, do the institutional thing, I think we'd also kind of look at crowdfunding again, because it was so positive last time. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. One of the big advantages for us actually is, we kept the sort of perks of the kind of crowdfunding thing quite kind of limited. But one of the things we do have is a sort of, a shareholder forum where kind of people can ask questions and kind of get involved. And that's been really, really valuable for us in terms of just having a base of customers who are very engaged and can sort of, tell us what they think of the product and what they think of some of our ideas and things. So that's very valuable.
Now, Neil, I'm conscious of time. So are there any final pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's one of those things where if you're going to do it, it is a big kind of sink of time, and so you've got to just think about, how do I, do I have the staff to dedicate 1 or 2 people to it to kind of really make it a success, and it's one of those things that Crowdcube or Seeders can really help you along the way and tell you the kind of different sort of points that you're trying to hit along the way, but they can't do the work for you, so they'll kind of make sure that you're sort of on process, but they can't to do it for you. And so I just go into it realizing that it is a lot of work, and it's going to distract you from, for about a month and a half kind of period about what we're doing. But at the same time, it's also very, very positive for kind of businesses. It creates a real buzz around kind of employees as well, because in a lot of cases, it's the first time you've shared a lot of information kind of externally. So that would be one kind of bit of advice. And then the other one actually would be, just decide in advance what material you're kind of willing to share, and why not? Because you'll get lots of questions around, can you share me this? From P&Ls to cohort charts to marketing kind of cost per acquisitions. So really just have a clear idea in your mind. This is what I'm willing to share. This is what I'm not, such that when people come and kind of ask the question, it's it's something that you have a clear answer on. So for us, the only bits of information that we kind of shared that we hadn't shared beforehand was, someone asked about just what was the sort of the equivalent share price of sort of previous investment rounds. So in their head, they just wanted to sort of see what was the kind of progression of the share price from Series A to Series B to Series C, which is actually something you could have worked out if you sort of read the numbers off the charts and things like that. And so we're happy to kind of to do that for them. And then another one was, ours kind of went live right in the middle of sort of the whole Black Lives Matter, when it was kind of top of the news agenda. And so we had a couple of questions around, well, what's the makeup of the team? What are the sort of nationalities and genders and things of the team? And so, that was when we thought that's a fair enough question. So we kind of, prepared something on that and released it. Everything else was pretty much, we haven't shared it. So Cohort charts being a good example. We look at them all the time. They're super important to us. We're on top of it and we're happy with how they're progressing, but it's not something that we're going to share. Because the other thing to remember is that your competitors are looking at this stuff. So you've got to be very careful that about what information that you share.
Fantastic. Neil, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you sharing your crowdfunding experience.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. And all the best.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. For more advice, head over to crowdfundingchampions.com and be sure to subscribe for the latest interviews.